Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and this is our top 100 favorite board games of all time. And today we are counting down the 70s.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about the games on this list. So I think let's get right to it, and I'm starting us off. My number 80 is Sonora, which is a flick and write game. You flick these discs onto a board, and then where the discs end up is what you get to do for each of the different areas. There are 4 different areas that match up to the writing bit, and each of those 4 all work a little bit differently for how you cross them off, but can lead to some really fun combos upon combos upon combos. But the best bit for me is really the flicking part, because you can really try and flick people's discs off the space that they want to be on, or really try and aim so that you end up on the special ×2 space, or it can lead to some really interesting things.
Yeah, it's a super simple kind of version of Crokinole, which is a Canadian treasure, but it's a super simple version of that, and we've gotten better and better. At first we felt like, I don't know about this part's kind of too simple, but as we've gotten better at it, it gets just a lot more competitive in that part of the game, which is all interactive, and then it goes back to just you writing it down. So it's this interesting kind of back and forth of this thing that's so interactive, and then this thing that's completely solitary where you're crossing off and comboing and doing all of this.
Yeah, because the crossing off bit can be interesting. There is a combo you frequently get that lets you choose an area, so we do find that we specialize in some of the other areas, and that is my number 80.
My number 80 is Tidal Blades, Part 1, Heroes of the Reef. And Tidal Blades on paper is not a game that I should like. This looks like it is just a dice chucker, because it's a ton of dice, and you're these characters who are moving around these islands, and the islands are beautiful. The whole thing just looks refreshing. I want to just be out there with a beverage on the beach, but you're moving around these islands and you're doing jet ski tricks and you're fighting kaiju with these dice. But secretly, this has got all of these cool Euro mechanics hidden underneath that, because the dice are really kind of a deck building thing where you're leveling up the dice and you've got different routes you can go in how you level them up. And then at the same time, you're doing this kind of track mechanic that is actually a dial, where you're turning this dial, and that dial helps you in different ways, where it gives you different dice or access to different cards or whatever it might be. And all of that works together in this way that really surprised me.
Yeah, it does. And what you're saying about the look is totally true. It looks amazing. And we just got the retail version, which was a lot cheaper than the Kickstarter. And I don't think you even need the Kickstarter. The retail comes in a much more reasonable size box, and it looks like it would be the fancy version.
It's one of those games you see on the table and you're like, what is this? I want to know more about this. It's really inviting, and I think that's a big part of what brought me in. And it is my number 80.
My number 79 is Honey Buzz, and I love the theme. You're bees that are making honey and selling it to forest creatures, and it looks lovely. It probably actually looks a little bit easier than it actually is, though, because what it is it's a worker placement game. So you have to put your bees out and collect these tiles and lay them out on your beehive. But the action of what you're doing is actually a step removed. It's not based on the tile you get. It's once you complete a hexagon on your beehive, and then you get to perform all of those actions. So there's a lot of decisions for when you complete it and which actions you perform in what order.
Yeah, it's you've got a few different levels to the game of putting out your bees and then worrying about your hive. And then when you're activating those with your fanning action, it's both what different nectars do you get so that you can sell that honey to the woodland creatures, and also what actions are going to happen to build for future turns.
Yeah, and the honey that you're fulfilling goes to a changing market, because once that order is fulfilled, a new one comes out, so somebody might scoop that customer, but also there's this market value where the value decreases, so you might just sell a lot of pollen when it's at a high value. So lots of different things to consider, and that's my number 79.
My number 79 is Merchant's Cove. And Merchant's Cove really shines in its asymmetry. This is as asymmetrical as a game can get. Basically everyone's playing almost a different game. You've got a separate game board and you're making goods, because the game is you are at this cove and you're merchants. And so you've got to sell goods to these different ships that are coming down to the cove to buy goods from whoever gets there with the right kind of goods for that color of person. Like green people want green goods, red people want red goods. But how you make the goods is wildly different based on your character. So there's one character that's like this dice placement game. There's one character that's like a little mini kind of potion explosion. There's one of the expansion characters like a roll and write. There's a Mancala. And there's, even though it seems at first like there's not a lot of interaction, there's a lot of interaction involved in how you're placing those customers and where they're going to those different docks.
Yeah, and that interaction can be pretty mean, because I do like the asymmetry of the different characters and making the goods, but you don't have full control over what docks the customers end up on. So I have run into the situation where I've had a lot of like one colored good, and I think, oh, I'm going to stack this boat filled with that one color and then make sure they get to the dock I need. But then you'll be moving that boat before I can, and you'll purposely move it to the opposite dock. And I'm like, no, I was going to get so many points. So it can be frustrating.
Yeah, it definitely can be frustrating, because you've got to kind of hedge your bets. But you can definitely get screwed, and it can feel bad sometimes. But I can take that bit of meanness just because it's so much fun for me to use these different characters on my little board. And that is my 79.
My number 78 is Now or Never, and this is the third in the Arzium trilogy by Ryan Lockett. And just like the previous ones, it was designed by Ryan Lockett, and the art is also by him too. And it's a beautiful world. And it's really more of an open exploration than the other two. You're this character on a map, and you get to visit different locations. You can perform actions at those locations. You can complete quests. You can fight monsters. And separately to that, you're also spending a lot of time constructing a town and moving people into the different buildings of the town. So there's a lot to keep track of. I think the tricky is when we first started playing this, we were playing the full version, and it took about 4 hours. Probably overstayed its welcome for me. And once we started playing a shorter version that was posted on BGG, that really made it more approachable. We were more likely to play it then.
Yeah, it's an official shorter version, because I think this was a complaint a lot of people had, and Ryan Lockett was like, all right, cool, well, how about if you start with all this stuff and do these other things? And it feels a bit like Uwe Rosenberg has a lot of these short versions that I think always work really well, and this works really well. And there are so many avenues you could take, because you didn't even mention there's also asymmetric character sheets. It's such a like sandbox, and such a culmination of, it feels like everything he was working on in the first two games in the trilogy too.
Yeah, and I would say it's the heaviest for sure of the three, but I do like being able to have that free exploration in that world and being able to make lots of different decisions, and it is my number 78.
My number 78 is Shakespeare, and I like Shakespeare for a few reasons. First is I just love Shakespeare. I've been such a big fan of Shakespeare since forever. And also, this was really hard for us to find, and if ever you've really hunted down a game and you finally found that game, you know that it's got a little bit of extra glow on it afterwards, but just the gameplay is great. This is, it's just a solid kind of tableau building game where you're adding these cards, which are characters from different Shakespeare plays, but also those cards are your actions. So it's also an action selection game where you've got up to 5 actions you can do each turn. But I say up to because that part's also a bidding mechanism, because whoever uses the least actions goes first the next turn, which can be very important in this game and is always very difficult to do against Jess, who really is determined to go first whenever there's those sorts of mechanics in a game.
You have to go first. That's how you get the best stuff. And so if I know Shawn's gunning for first and is only going to do like 3 actions, I'll be like, all right, I'll do 2 and I'll take that first. What I really want to try though is the expansion, the backstage expansion, but it's impossible to find, but I hear that adds a lot.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it because it was so hard to find the base game, and from what I understand, that is way harder to find. But Shakespeare is just, I feel like it's a modern classic, and I wish that they would reprint it because it's been out of print for a while, and it's too good a game to be out of print, and it's my 78.
My number 77 is Earth, which just came out this year. And one of the best things is that everyone is involved every turn. It has this interesting action selection system where on your turn you get to pick one of the 4 main actions, but everybody else also gets to do that action. They just do a weaker version of it. And it also has tableau building, which I'm a big fan of. The tableau and where you put your cards is going to affect the scoring, but it also is going to affect what else you can do on those turns. So it can lead to some really, like, I get to, anytime this color is activated, all of the ones on my tableau of that color will activate as well. So you can lead to some really interesting combos that go way beyond just the base action.
Yeah, and on top of the, like, you're playing out your cards to have those combos, there's also all these different goals that everyone's kind of driving towards that are deciding where you are going to put things. And it's a bit of this kind of Calico feel where you've got these 3 different goals telling you have to put this kind of thing here. Well, you've got like 7 goals, really, telling you have to put these like this. And there's no way you are going to satisfy all of these goals. And I always enjoy that in a game that, like, I just got to let go of something, and I'm just doing the rows one. I'm not going to worry about the columns one right now. But if you can get it all to work, it feels so good.
And it is tricky. This is how you've won a lot recently, is because it's done when somebody has completed their 16 cards, and you have been getting that because I've been holding out to be able to achieve all of the goals. And if you can get the 16 cards out, you're usually in a much better position. So you have to give up on some of them. And that is my number 77.
My number 77 is Flamecraft. And Flamecraft it's set in this super adorable world where there's all of these shops and there's people and dragons working together, but the dragons are like non-threatening size. They're like half the size of people. They're super adorable. And in the game, it's a worker placement game. So most of the time you're putting dragons on stores, you're getting resources, and then you're using dragon powers, and you're adding more dragon cards to the stores as well, which are chaining different things. But sometimes you're also putting out these cards which are like enhancements, and then that's kind of scoring you the bulk of your points. But it's cool because of how the game end triggers, where you've got these 2 different decks, one for the enhancement, one for the dragons. And some games, people are really driving to those enhancements and really getting their engines going. And some games, it's just get more dragons, get more dragons. And so it can play really different from game to game.
Yeah, it is interesting because the pace ramps up throughout the whole game. Because it starts off with very few dragons and very few shops, so the stuff you're getting it isn't a lot, and you get more and more as you go, and you get more and more cards, and so all of a sudden you are getting tons of resources or tons of points and really going through those decks.
And you've also got these dragon goals as well that you can gain more of that also get you a lot of points too. So there's a lot of little like customizable touches to it. But mostly I love the world. I love the art. And I want to see other kind of side games like how Tidal Blades does, all based in this Flamecraft world, just so I can see more of these dragons. But that is my 77.
My number 76 is Targi, and Targi is a 2-player only game, and it only uses cards with no board, but it's a worker placement game. And how it does that is all the actions go along the outside, and then you put in new cards on the inside. And when you put your workers down, it's where they intersect that lets you do the middle bit. So there's different things you have to consider. You have to consider what action you want to do to where you want to put your workers on the outside, and what cards you want on the inside to get your resources or get those point scoring cards. and what you might want your opponent to not get, because they can't go opposite you. So if you see that there's a specific card they might be aiming for, you can just stand on that spot or the opposite spot to block that, or block the intersection.
So a big part of really what makes this interesting is you're usually, it feels like, doing your like second best or third best option on your turn, and then just figuring out what best can I do with this, because you also want specific cards to go in this tableau, which is how you score. And so you want the cards in your rows to be either matching or all different. So it's important what you get in the middle, but the other person knows that, and they're going to get in your way all the time.
They definitely will. And I feel like the expansion helps make it not too frustrating, because it does add another like off-board piece that you can put your worker on, and a wild resource. So you still get in each other's way, but it does still let you do some things when you're feeling really stuck, and makes it a full game. And that is my number 76.
Okay. My number 76 is Revive, which is a pretty new game. And Revive is a bit like Now or Never, is this kind of large sandboxy game where there's a lot of different things going on, but they all interact really interestingly. You've got this big shared board that you're exploring, and you're gaining resources from that, and you're putting out houses in different places on it. And then you've also got your own little technology board where you're trying to move along these tech tracks and add different tech powers that you can set off on your turn. And then you've also got this card system that's kind of the heart of the game, where you're playing different cards to these different slots, but you can put little bonuses that help give you extra resources when you do those cards. And then you've also got asymmetric characters, and I love asymmetric characters. And all of this stuff works together in just these really interesting ways. So it's pretty brain burny, but it's also not too brain burny. So there's a lot to like here.
What I find really interesting is these are the same designers that did Trails of Tucana,
right,
which is a much lighter game. So I was really interested to what this heavier game would be. And I do like finding those combos. I think one of the strongest parts is the ability to stretch out the round, because you might be able to find ways of doing things. And I really like that. If you're like, oh, I really want to explore, but I don't have the reach, and like, oh, I can use like lightning to get that extra reach. Finding those moments can make you feel really clever.
And those rounds too, that's not necessarily like it's like a game round that's set up. Everything in this game is kind of like this organically at your own pace. So your rounds are really just what's in between your rest actions. So it's how much can I stretch out and do everything, or do I just want to do a few things and bring it back and do your strong cards? And so Revive's got a lot of interesting things going on that I want to explore a lot more. And that is my 76.
My number 75 is So Clover, and this is a word guessing party game, and I will specify that I really like it when we play it at 2 players, and I don't think it's even officially 2 players.
No, this is a make-believe version. This is a slight alteration of someone else's made-up 2-player only version, and then we have since tweaked it to be our own 2-player version.
But how we play it is how I really like it. You get 4 cards that each have 4 sides, and you have to match them up in your clover, where each leaf gets 2 word clues that you have to write something to help give a clue for whoever's going to guess it afterwards. So if I have like shovel and rake, I might write tools, because all of those will come off, a new card gets shuffled in, and the other person has to try and line it up for all 4 clovers. But playing with Shawn, he takes it a step further, where it has to be a perfect clue. So it would be like comfy furniture, and it'd be couch. So instead of like one word that fits the umbrella of both of them, those 2 combined make the word.
I think the one I'm proudest of is there was one that was like Sticky and Satan, and I had Glucifer, which I feel very good about. But yeah, it really is finding, I always want one to be a little bit funny, and for them all to be like interesting, how the 2 things connect, because I don't just want it to be this thing is that category and this thing is that category, but these 2 together, what would they be? And that I think is the fun part. But how we play is that we have to get 2 perfect rounds back to back. And if we don't get 2 perfect rounds, it's a loss. So they have to be exactly perfect back to back. And it'll take us a while. And we won't stop until we nail it too, but it will take us a while sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have to end on a win. And we get tireder and less creative, and it gets harder, but we do achieve it eventually. It can take a while. But that is my number 75.
My number 75 is Viscounts of the West Kingdom. And we're pretty big fans of the Shem Phillips games, and specifically of the West Kingdom trilogy, which I think by far is best. And I've had a bit of an up and down with Viscounts. Or I loved it at first. And first, it might have been my favorite of the West Kingdom trilogy. But the castle is just overpowered. And once we realized that the castle was overpowered, it became this rush to the castle. But they brought out all these expansions, 2 different expansions this year, that I think really go a long way to evening that out. Not by like nerfing the castle, but by buffing everything else in the game. So now building is a viable strategy, and the books, the manuscripts are a viable strategy. Even just really focusing on the cards can be a strategy as well. So it's become a lot more interesting, although a little bit more unwieldy game, but it's definitely pulled me back into it.
Yeah, the expansions definitely helped even out all the options, but I always like doing the castle, and that may be why you don't like it so much, because it's a bit finicky. It maybe stops the game a little bit as people put out these meeples onto the castle and have to combo them up and across and over, and that might set off another one, which would set off another one. But I love the combos. I love when you can get lots of combos in a row. It just can feel really satisfying. But it is nice that now you can really focus on buildings or manuscripts, or even just have a more even strategy too.
And it's nice now that it is more balanced out because of those expansions. And that is why it is my 75.
My number 74 is Civilization New Dawn. And this is a Civ game, but it plays so quickly. I think that's what I like best about it. Instead of it being like a 2+ hour, it's like for us, like an hour full Civilization experience. And it uses the Arc Nova, or I should say, Arc Nova uses its action selection system of the cards going out for what you can do, and the longer it's out, then the stronger the action that you can perform. And I just love that choice of, do I do what I want to do that's at a lower value, or do I wait a couple turns and do it when it's stronger? And we didn't know if it would work for 2, but I really like it. It still feels like you get to explore, you get to build up your strength of all your different actions. You get to fight either barbarians or forts, rarely each other, which is nice.
Yeah, we rarely fight each other. And the exploration actually comes from the expansion, but we bought the expansion pretty much when we bought the base game, so they're kind of intertwined for us. And I think people do say you kind of need the expansion, and I agree with that. And this one, I think, just works really well at 2.
Yeah, and it is one where the end game trigger is when somebody has completed like a certain number of the goals, so it can come at any time. And I like that I usually am the one that triggers the end, which often leads to the win, which is great. And that is my number 74.
My number 74 is Unmatched. And I'm kind of just lumping the whole system in together because this is a whole lot of boxes now. This fills most of a shelf for us now. And I've been playing this since back when it was Star Wars Epic Duels. And I was very excited to hear that system was coming back, and we just jumped into that with both feet. But it is really fun to be able to match up like Beowulf versus Alice from Alice in Wonderland, or like Houdini versus a T-Rex. We've got a whole mishmash of stuff in this game. It's just a great, simple card playing like fighting game. And you don't even really usually like fighting games, but I can sell you on this one.
Yeah, that is true. This is one I am happy to play. And I think it's just because all of the characters and things do feel so different that it is fun to switch between like being the Raptors or being Invisible Man. And games are quick. I mean, they never really last more than 20 minutes. So even if you have like a really bad string and you do terribly, I mean, you can quickly just start a new game soon afterwards.
And this is when we we generally play this in tournaments as well. So we kind of play this in spurts. We'll like draft like 8 characters each and have a whole 16 character tournament. And Jess always acts like she's not good at this, but she usually wins those tournaments. And I've got the brackets to prove it.
Maybe I do win, but usually combat games aren't my favorite, but this is one I am happy to play.
And it is my 74.
My number 73 is Rolling Realms, and this is the second and right game on my list. We love the and right games. It's just so fun and quick and an easy setup. And Rolling Realms, what it does really is add so much replayability, because even with the base one, you have these different cards that represent the Stonemaier games, and you play with like 3 of them each round. And so the combination of which card you were playing, which is usually completely different, like you might have like tapestry in between 2 castles and something else, and you're using the dice to be able to cross those off, but again, they're all like little mini games. They all get crossed off in different ways. I think we've played this like 50 plus times.
Yeah, and like you said, it was originally the Stonemaier games, but it is now expanded to oodles. I don't even know how many different cards. We've got quite a few of them, and there's some cool ones too, like Arc Nova and Terra Mystica, and I think there might be a Baron Park.
Honey Buzz, which made our list, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool games that are represented in this kind of specifically Rolling Realm style. I mean, the card system and how interchangeable that is it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it uses cards that you can use the like dry erase markers on, and that system works so well because you can have so many different kinds that you can just write on. And yeah, we played it a lot. The dice are nice, big, chunky dice, and it is my number 73.
My number 73 is Star Wars Rebellion, and this is one we play like once a year. And the only reason it's this low on the list is that it is so hard to bring to the table. It's enormous. And because we play it so rarely, we always have to relearn it. There's a lot to it. But that's also the plus side, is it's enormous and there's a lot to it. This is just a huge Star Wars experience, and it really feels like Star Wars, especially with the expansion, which really tweaks the combat system in a really positive way, and it adds a bunch of characters from Rogue One, and I love Rogue One. But this, it's just got everything you would want from Star Wars. It's got all the ships, it's got big Death Stars, it's got building Death Stars, it's got sneaking around, and as the rebels, you've got to like hide out and just kind of build up a little bit until you can blow up that Death Star, and as the Empire, you're just trying to find and crush. And I do always have to play the rebels in this, though. You are set on the Empire.
Yes, and it's because it's so scary being the rebels, because the Empire have so many troops and so many ships and are like taking over the galaxy, and your odds feel so slim as the rebellion. So I've tried it, I think, only a couple of times, but each time I think I've been like too scared to move my planet, and then you've just discovered me because I've just been like hunkering down, hoping for the best. Whereas, I mean, you still do very well when you're the rebellion, but as the Empire, I just feel like I have like such a better chance.
Yeah, and Jess is just a fan of the overdog, but I do like that hiding in the shadows, and it is rare that I win this, especially with the rebellion, but when you do, it is so exciting, especially if you can win blowing up the Death Star, which I think I've only done once. I think I usually win by just being alive long enough to survive, but even that is fun. And this really is the Star Wars game, and it is my 73.
My number 72 is Kanban, and this is a game that I like almost despite the theme, because I'm not really that big into cars, and in Kanban you are running this car factory, but it's a Vitel Lacerda game, so his games are all very interconnected. And I think this is the one that I connect with most because I think the parts seem a little bit more visible. There's car parts and car designs, and you bring the cars out, and then you can like get those cars into the garage. So some of the other ones I find are maybe a few longer steps in how things connect and just like increase the brain capacity a little bit more. Whereas this one still, you really have to like focus on the game. But there is something about it I think feels a little bit more approachable than some of the other heavier Lacerda games.
Yeah, it's a heavy game, no doubt, but it's smooth. It's like a really smooth, it's like a welcoming heavy game. And we've got the driver's edition, and I got to tell you, I love it because it's half the price of the new version, and honestly, it's got everything that I want in it, and I like its kind of clunky, colored, clutteredness and like the look of the board and everything. And this is it's such a great Lacerda game, and I like Lacerda. I like the idea of playing Lacerda games, but sometimes they feel a little bit like work, and this one never does. It's just so smooth, and it has so much going on, but it makes so much sense.
Because there is a lot going on, but it seems, I don't know, it seems to all be almost displayed. You can tell where you can get seats, and you can tell what like half the goals are, and all of it is enough that spoiler alert, this is my highest Lacerda game, and it's my number 72.
My number 72 is Gloomhaven, and Gloomhaven has fallen a little bit because it's been a while since we had the big Gloomhaven experience. But when we did, Gloomhaven was terrific. It was really cool opening those boxes. It was really cool playing through the whole campaign. We were in it. The tricky with it is I just have not been able to rekindle that at all. The expansion, honestly, is just straight up terrible. The sequel, Frosthaven, is terrific, and if you want more stuff, it's got more stuff, but it's more stuff than what I wanted, and I find that when we're doing the outpost phase, it just slows it down. I don't like crafting in games, and I just feel like, you know what, I want to be in the dungeon, and I want to play with the characters in the dungeon, and I want to open up more characters, and I want to fight some bad guys. That's what I want in my Gloomhaven. So I've even mulled over, we've talked about it, just taking the Frosthaven characters and replaying through the Gloomhaven campaign with them, just playing original Gloomhaven. And maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, because I think there's also Jaws of the Lion, which we
Right.
both liked. But the tricky with that is you don't get the experience of retiring your characters and starting a new one. And that was one of our favorite parts of Gloomhaven, was becoming an expert on a type of character and then having to learn a completely different character. And because you don't get that with Jaws, even though you get to do a lot of the fighting and it's kind of a smoothed out system, that part was missing. So maybe we do take our Frosthaven characters and play through Gloomhaven.
Or we just keep mulling through Frosthaven. I don't know. I think if you're the sort of person, though, who sees that like a video game has 600 hours of gameplay and you see that as a positive, you'll really like that. I see that and I think, I'm not touching that video game with anything. Just give me NHL 94 again. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. But I loved the experience of Gloomhaven, and I would love to be able to recreate that experience again. But it's still my 72.
My number 71 is Gingerbread House, which is by Phil Walker Harding, who is so great at making easy to learn and fun to play light medium games. And Gingerbread House, there's something about that has become one of our staples for we're not too sure what to play, or we're looking for one more quick game at the end of the night. And I think we've played it so many times, and it's so simple. You are trying to get these fairy tale creatures by covering your board with gingerbread, and whatever you cover is the gingerbread that you get, and that can trap the fairy tale creatures. But I don't know. I don't know what about it makes it stand up from other ones as our go-to, but it has just become that game that we turn to.
Yeah, it's one of the few. It's like that and Ganymede and Between Two Castles, I feel like, are the three that kind of fill that. And it's just, I think it says something about us being board game addicts, that we've got games that we play when we're done playing board games, but we're like, oh, we need one more and then I'll go home. But this is so that one more and then I'll go home. Just easy comfort game that I love it. And the theme is so funny too, that you're trying to capture and presumably murder fairy tale characters.
Yeah, it is a great theme. It does seem I think a lot of people put it on like the winter list because of gingerbread and winter.
Yeah.
But we play it all year round, and it's my number 71.
My number 71 is Suburbia. And I love city building games. I love tile placement games. And this is one of the best at both of those things mushed together. And in Suburbia, you're building a city. You're building a little, I guess, suburban city. And you're building out residential and industrial and commercial. And you're aiming for goals. And it's got this really cool system where you're building up your population. But as you do, you kind of drop your income. So you're trying to build both your population and your income, but if your population grows too fast, your income starts to decline because of how the scoring track works, and you pass across these houses that drop your stats, which kind of, it's a really cool like catch-up mechanic for the game and just kind of slowing you down a little bit. But we got the big collector's edition, so we've got all of the expansions with that too, and the expansions add a ton, and I highly recommend doing the double market variant. But it's just do a line of the original tiles, and then you've got a line of all of the expansion tiles mushed together, and then when you take one, you just discard the other, so you've always got two choices in every slot. It's just so much fun that way. You have so many choices and options, and it loosens it up a little bit, but it's really fun.
And it is nice to always have the special tiles as an option, because those add some like interesting different things. So it's great that there's always one of those available, as well as the base ones which you might want. And it does a really great job of having to pick tiles, and some of those tiles will activate based on what's your city, but some of them also activate based on what's in other people's city. So again, you could be like really hoping that the other person collects a whole bunch of this thing, because you'll end up with a lot of coins or income or something as well. So you're right. It does city building and tile placement just so well.
Yeah, and those expansion tiles, some of them are kind of situational, so it's nice having that double market, because then you can still have those situational tiles and they don't feel punishing, but you still have the fun of having like a vampire den, or like some of the nightlife ones are really fun. So you can still have those when it fits what you're doing and it doesn't hurt the rest of the game. So it's great, and it is my 71. And that is it. That brings us to the end of the 70s, and next time we'll be counting down the 60s. I've always wanted to say that. Counting down the 60s. Come back for all rock all day.
But interestingly, about our list, none of the games we picked were the same for that chunk.
No, we've barely had any over this whole 30, but none in this 10. Not one. I was so sure we would have at least an imperfect crossover, but absolutely no crossover whatsoever.
I do think it might get a little bit similar as we go along, but we'll find out. As usual, thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you've played the games, if you liked any of the games that we've talked about, and please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.